I just want to say a few words in introducing Shivani. I think, of course, Ananda Europa Guru Bhai's, she doesn't need any introduction at all. But she's been in Italy for a very long time serving the work there. But she is also, for those of us here in the States, she was one of the founding members of Ananda, and has just in herself is such a great example of discipleship. I was very blessed to work with her many years ago, and in a time when I was in Assisi for 3 months that was life-changing for me. So I'm just so excited to have you here today, Shivani, to share with us, and we're going to hand it over to you now.
So thank you for this invitation, and I welcome all of you into the house of Swami Kriyananda. We're in his living room, and this is the chair where he sat. He spent a lot of time in this chair. He would sit here and read, and we actually have the books that he was reading at the time that he left his physical body. He would sit here and edit his manuscripts. He lived here for 7 years. He would sit here and have tea and chat with friends, just so many things. So I'm glad that on this day of honoring him and his discipleship, that you are able to be here at this time. I would like to play just a couple minutes of a talk that Swami has given about himself and about his discipleship. So let's hope I find this right away. All right. Well, let me tell you then what Swami was saying in this. In fact, I have the words written, and maybe I can read them to you because I'd like to talk about this. Swami said, "The first words I said to Master were, 'I want to be your disciple.' And in 33.5 years, I haven't for 1 second had cause or ever wanted to or had the least thought of backing off from that decision. Why? Because I wanted truth, and that is what I was looking for. And when I found somebody who had it and could share it, that's all I wanted. And since then, there have been people who have tried to persuade me that he wasn't a master, or that there are other greater masters. Someone was saying that I should follow Satya Sai Baba because he is the greatest of them all. My answer to that is not to bother with making comparisons. It doesn't even matter to me whether Master is a completely realized master, although I'm convinced that he is. What matters to me is that he has what I want, and I have given my life to him. There is a commitment there that cannot be broken or even shaken. That kind of commitment is something that comes from the soul. It doesn't come from an intellectual decision. But if it were to be proved to me that there is someone else who is greater, I'm sure there are better women than my mother, but she is my mother. Why should I go running after others? I can honor all women as mothers, but there is something special the Divine Mother gave me in the form of one woman as my mother. The same thing is true with the whole idea of discipleship. Our openness is not to a man, it is to an instrument. God has sent Master to us. God has given us a particular way, and we know it is godly. We know it by every possible test that we can apply. Then, if someone were to come along and prove to us that Satya Sai Baba or some new messiah of the age or an avatar has more of what God wants done in the age, whatever reasons they could come up with, it no longer matters. This is the window that God has brought to me. As I said to someone, even if your way is better, I could not be sincere following your way. Let me be sincere at least, following my second best way, if that is all that it is. Isn't this extraordinary? It was really a wonderful talk, and you can find it. I'm going to just turn this light down a little bit. It's in my eyes. Okay. What Swami is talking about here is something that when I came on the path, I really couldn't understand and didn't want to even take into consideration being a very young person, and that's loyalty. You know, Master, in his first lessons, I believe, his corresponding lessons, he states, loyalty is the first law of God. And I just couldn't wrap my mind around that. In fact, for a long time, I just couldn't decide who my guru was. I mean, I was living in Ananda, enjoying all of the benefits of living in such a beautiful, magical place. It was almost like Brigadoon, for those of you who have ever seen that operetta, just appeared into my life. And I would really tie myself in knots for several years trying to make the decision, when finally what I realized is that we don't choose our guru, no matter how much we think we do, but we are chosen by the guru. We are his and he is ours. We are the chosen people. There's a series that's around now. Perhaps some of you have been watching it. We have here at Ananda Assisi, that's called The Chosen. I won't say anything about it except how appropriate that name is, because that series is not about Jesus so much, it's about the disciples. And Swamiji was all about being a disciple. He made that commitment not just in that moment, but Swami committed himself to doing and to following what Master said. And I'd like to talk now about a few of those things. One thing that we all know about is Master's predictions and things that he said about times to come, about a terrible cataclysm, and about how we should take seriously and be prepared. Now, Swamiji heard Master say that, and as a loyal disciple of Master, he was committed to doing everything he could to make that happen. And so those of you who have been around for some time during Swami's life, you probably have heard him talk about again and again and again the importance of being prepared. And he started this in the very earliest years. I mean, it was the early 1970s. I mean, the community was still in its infancy at that time, and we were buying food and storing it in steel containers with dry ice, and we were working the gardens, preparing them so they would be able to support us in these difficult times. And I think it was 1974, we didn't have much experience in this, and he was convinced because he had heard Master say it. I can't say how much we were, but he sent us out to travel around California, mainly as I recall. Perhaps we went into Oregon and also into Washington State. I don't remember precisely, but we went out. There was Jyotish, there was Devi, and they were not yet Jyotish and Devi. They were Jyotish, Devi. There was Santosh. There was myself. There was Asha. And I think there was one or two other people. I remember one of my jobs there was I brought along the bottles for making sprouts, which I was teaching people how to make sprouts and why sprouts were so good and so forth. But Swami, when he heard Master say something, when he saw Master set a direction, he gave it his full energy and full force. Because of his loyalty to Master and because of his loyalty to us, the other disciples of Master, his co-disciples. Often, he told us, I have two desires in this life. One is to know God, and the second is to share Him and to help others to find Him. So Swami was very loyal to that. I mean, up until the very end, he continued to talk and to exhort and to stimulate and to ask and to make sure that the communities would have gardens and farms. I don't know if Texas has one, but I know that they do outside of Seattle, outside of Palo Alto, of course the Village. Our gardens and farms and orchards during the COVID period have flourished. And all this winter, we were able to eat food that was put up from the harvest of last summer. And there are many people who are doing that again now. So whatever Master put into motion, Swami felt it his responsibility as a disciple, his commitment to Master, to be a loyal disciple, to follow through with it. I remember Swami saying once, perhaps he said it more often in other contexts, he said, just as when I was Henry I in the incarnation when Master was William the Conqueror, I understood that my job was to carry forward everything that William had set into motion. And then he would show historically how Henry did exactly that. Well, Swami did exactly that with the different things that Master had set into motion in this incarnation, the gifts that he was bringing from the infinite into the world to help humanity at this time to rise up to higher consciousness. And so I'd like to mention a few of them, and I've made a few notes. Master called his teachings back in the day how to live teachings. He said that he was distilling the essence of Sanatana Dharma for this age of Dwapara Yuga and bringing it to people. Because as we know from the initiation of Lihiri Mahashaya by Babaji, that this is the age when spirituality can be and must be lived by everyone who feels in their heart that they want to seek God. So Master's teachings were very broad. I mean, he gave so many lectures around the country. He spoke to business people. He spoke to women's groups. He spoke to literary groups. He spoke with politicians in different cities, in different countries, always applying the teachings of self-realization to daily life. How to live teachings. And Swami took that as his mission, and through his writings and through his lectures, he carried forth this wave, this direction. And all of us have benefited. I mean, look at the scope of Master's books. I mean, we have everything from, I remember when he wrote the book, Your Sun Sign as a Spiritual Guide. It was early on. That was one of his very first books. He was still living at the meditation retreat. This is before he had built the Crystal Hermitage. So we're talking 1971, maybe. And so he was writing this book on astrology, even though he himself was not really an expert astrologist. And I remember it because from time to time, he would call it our sign. So my sun's sign is, what does it say? My connection's not great. Can you still hear me? Are we okay? Give me a sign. That's a sign. Okay. My sun sign in Western and Eastern astrology is Aquarius. So he called me down to his dome at the meditation retreat. He's, Shivani, please, he was so, kind. I mean, can you imagine? Shivani, please read this and tell me if it rings true for you. I read it and it was spot on. I mean, so deep. I mean, just getting right to the heart, both of the idealism, and the desire to share, everything that's on the highest and deepest level that I could understand a part of Aquarius. I've always loved that book, not just for what it says about my sign, but what it says for all of the signs. And if you haven't read that book in a while, pick it up. It's early writing of Swami, but just as insightful. And so he wrote a book about marriage, how to expand the vision of your marriage, the hidden message in the arts. What else do we have? Philosophy, of course, for business, material success through yoga principles, how to magnetize money. He wrote his book on leadership. I don't know if you realize this. You can ask perhaps Crystal Clarity. In 1990, Swami he recorded this in his dome at Crystal Hermitage, back before it was renovated. It looked different back then. He recorded 3 series. And one of those series was a course in leadership divided into 3 levels. He called them just beginning leadership, intermediate, and advanced. And each of those levels has 12 short talks. The talks are between 12 and 18 minutes, and they are enlightening, just wonderful. We have them here, we study them here, and I'm sure if you search for them, you will find that they're available. He did 2 other series at that time. One of them was 8 lessons in meditation. I don't know if you know about that course. You know, many of you have come after Swami and have learned meditation from others of the ministers. Okay. I can't see all of you, but if you're familiar with his course, half-hour classes, 8 lessons in meditation. Raise your hand. I can only see a few of you. And the few of you I can see you don't know about that. So please look for that. You will find it somewhere. Swami himself teaching meditation. He talks about attitudes. He talks about devotion. He talks about chanting. And of course concentration and so forth. So the point being that one aspect of what Master incarnated to do was to bring Sanatana Dharma from the mysterious past and to make its truths a reality for people living today. And we know how seriously, Swami took that part of his mission on Master's behalf. He said that writing did not come easy to him. Hard to believe, isn't it? I mean, his books flow so beautifully. He said it was easy for him to write music. It just came. In fact, he couldn't shut it off. He said when he got up in the morning, there was a melody. When he was eating, there was a melody. There were more melodies that were lost than those that he finally wrote down. But the books, he said, I had to discipline myself. I had to apply and he did as a disciple. Okay? So we're beginning to see the dimensions of discipleship. It's not just calling ourselves, I'm a disciple of an avatar. I'm a disciple of an avatar of this age. I made my vows. For Swami, being a disciple meant living discipleship and being an instrument in tune, always trying to be in tune with Master to carry forth what Master came to do. Now, another thing that was dear to Master's heart was education for children. And we know about the schools that he started and that still exist in a much different form in India today. And when Master came to the United States, because that had been his experience. I mean, he was a young man. He was very young. He was, I think, not even out of his teens when he established that first school. And he had years of experience, and he wanted to establish that kind of school based on how to live principles, to teach children, not just facts and history, but really what it means to be a well-rounded person. The one article that he wrote about education, he called The Balanced Life. And you can find it in one of Master's books, one of the trilogy. And he attempted to establish schools for children. But what he realized was he couldn't raise up the children in a higher count, first raising up the consciousness of their parents. So he left that, and he didn't come back to that. But Swami did. And so his book, Education for Life, which was written after the schools had been started. Oh, I remember the first school. Yeah, when we moved to the farm, it was in the summer of 1970. You know, it was a farm, and there were farm buildings there, and some of those buildings were where they kept the chickens. Okay, can you envision that? Chicken coops. So one or two of the chicken coops was converted into a school. And I remember it was Nitai, of course, because Swami charged him to meditate on it, to read that article, and to begin to use Master's How to Live principles for educating children. There was Saraswati, the wife of Ganesha, and perhaps another teacher. Anyway, perhaps you've seen some photographs from that time. Very famous photograph of Saraswati walking hand in hand with some of the toddlers who now have their own toddlers who aren't even toddlers anymore. They probably have grand toddlers by now. You know, the first actual construction at Ananda Village, what do you think it was? Most people think that it was the publications building, which came along. But the first building was actually a school. It was, we just called it the Green Schoolhouse. I myself, hammer in hand, helped to build that building. And so the schools were started. And then after some years, together with Nitai, Swami wrote the book and had all of his life been very active in following and motivating and stimulating education for life. And this is one of the aspects that reaches far beyond Ananda, because Swami has always known that Master, just like Jesus, came not just for those disciples that were there, and not just for the monastic disciples who could live in his ashram, but Master came for everyone. And so education for life is not sectarian, but an offering from Master through Swamiji's discipleship for the world, and it will live on. You know, perhaps it will be the primary thing that is remembered and continued. The education for life, living wisdom schools, and the communities. Master, and again, I don't know if you are aware of this, actually started a university. Were you aware of that? It was called Mount Washington University. He wrote the bylaws himself. He was the first president and one of the first teachers. And let me see. It was in 1941 that he wrote the charter for the Mount Washington University. So it was incorporated in the state of California on July 16th, 1941, and it actually functioned. You can read in the old magazines that the curriculum included philosophy, yoga, metaphysics, physical culture, mental training, comparative religions, and other courses. And it was to offer a 3-year and a 4-year degree. Now that's in July. Now, then there's an announcement that says the university will start its first class on Monday, September 29th, 1941, with Paramhansa Yogananda teaching, Miss Sally, Mrs. Downs as the instructors. Then a summer session was announced, and it was held at Encinitas, the Golden Temple, and that was in June of 1940, in June of that year. And then a second semester of the Mount Washington University was started, opened during the first week of February 1940. It was at this university that Master gave his classes on Patanjali. I think there were 42 or 44 of those lessons. Now, Swami, being a loyal disciple, when he went to India, one of the things that he did was to lay out a curriculum for a university. And I would like to read from what he wrote. He hoped to establish a university. He called it the Living Wisdom Institute. And these were ideas he had in 2006. And just note the similarities. The courses would include philosophy, the history of civilization, education for life, the history of religion, directional psychology, for which Swami gave extensive notes about the content, especially of the course in directional psychology. So here we see Swamiji again taking what Master brought and continuing it, moving it forward. Let's see, what time is it? Let me see if I can. Okay. Do I still have a little time, Maitreyi? Yes? Is that a yes?
Yeah, absolutely. It's 11 after here. You're welcome to talk, and just as long as we have a little bit of time for, Q&A. And so
sure. I just probably have another 5 minutes. Okay.
Okay. No, perfect.
All right. So, 3 more things. The most obvious for all of us is community. Master, that fateful day in July, what was it, 1949 in Beverly Hills. We see it in the Finding Happiness movie. We see it in the movie The Answer, holding up his hands. My words, are in the ether, and they shall move the West. Okay. So Master plants the seeds way back then. And then we see in the movie, it was really one of the most touching frames, words there. I vowed that day that I would do everything in my power to realize his dream. Yeah. This is, Swami, being the true disciple. And so we know everything that he has done in order to do that. Master brought Kriya Yoga to the Western world. And Swamiji has continued to make Kriya Yoga known. Now, Master initiated we don't know how many people, but thousands, probably tens of thousands. And Swamiji has continued that tradition, the original tradition of passing on the authority and the power to initiate people and to support people in their practice of Kriya Yoga, and not to hold it back as something exclusive. Sacred, yes, and not to be lightly given, but not exclusive. Master was not exclusive. Jesus did not come just for the Jewish people. Master did not come just for his monastic disciples. He came for us in generations in the future. So Swamiji, by training leaders, spiritual leaders, giving them not just teachings, but tests and challenges, has brought up probably now 2 generations of Kriyacharyas. I don't even know how many there are in the world. Here in Europe, there are 11 of us, and who knows how many more. But many channels who are in tune with how, and not just to give it and let people be on their own, but to continue to help and support people as Swamiji did for us. Master had a monastic order, and that order is still going, both in the United States and also in India, as you go to Satsanga. And Swamiji also started not just 1, but 2 monastic orders. The first one he started was in 1971 or 1972. And now that I think about it, I think he started it on this day of his discipleship, because it was in September of that year. And he called that order the Friends of God. Titles mean a lot. They say a lot. They set a direction. They give a message. So just think about that concept, the Friends of God. Master said that friendship with God is the sweetest and the highest relationship that we can have. So he started, there were 7 of us. I don't know if you know yet some of them. There were Jaya, Nayaswami and Kriyacharya Jaya, Sadhana Devi, there was Binay, Seva, myself, Satya, who's now in Ananda Loka, and Haridas. There it is. The 7 of us. And actually Haridas and I both received our spiritual names at that time. And so the Friends of God was started as a monastic order, and it grew and grew and grew until there were, I don't know how many, there was probably 30, 40 or more men in one area, women in one area. Now we were all very active, serving all the time, but we lived in the monastery, which was at Crystal Hermitage. Not where Swami lived, but on Ayodhya. It was at Ayodhya. Now, there came a point when Swami saw that the people, the residents who were living in the community who were married, who had children, could not join the monastic order, felt less. They felt like second-class citizens. And so Swami set the community in a different direction, and that's when he himself married, and the householder path to spirituality got a lot of energy and light. Now, at the end, I'm going to jump now from 1972 to 2009. It's decades afterwards. And Swami, and I won't tell you that much. Swami establishes the renunciate order for the New Age. And again, following not only what Master had done, but Master bringing spirituality to the people, to everyone. Swami, through this order, helps people to understand that renunciation is the foundation of spirituality. Renouncing the ego, not renouncing things, but renouncing the ego, and that everybody can make a commitment to go in that direction. So in these ways, and I'm sure there are many more, Swami was a true and loyal disciple. And now we are following in Swami's footsteps. And I'll conclude, and then I'll let you ask questions. Alkan ceremony that Swami developed when he was living here in Italy. And that was he was visiting in 1986. He developed the festival of light and the purification. And I'd just like to mention that one sentence into which I feel he put so much of his understanding of what discipleship is. The Master says to us, "Open your heart to me, and I will enter and take charge of your life." That's what discipleship is. It's our connection and our loyalty to opening our hearts to Master, letting him in, and having the courage to say to him, "Take charge of my life. I am your disciple. Show me the way."